And now we turn to our interview with Maoz Inon, who is an Israeli peace activist whose parents were tragically killed on October 7th. Maoz Inon, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
Also, obviously, want to offer our condolences to you for your loss. Can you tell people, to the extent you're comfortable, obviously, about what happened to your family on October 7th?
Yes, of course. First, I will start that I was born 48 years ago in Kibbutz Niram. It's about a kilometer and a half of the Gaza border. My boss' grandparents were Zionist pioneers immigrating to Palestine under the British mandate at the 1930s something, founding two kibbutzim in the Negev. And when my parents got married, they moved to live at my father's house, at my father's home in kibbutz in Nir Am, where they raised my three sisters, my young brother, and myself. And at the age of 14, we moved to Netiv Asara. It's another small Israeli community, about 1,000 people, just touching the border, the Gaza border from the north side. On October the 7th, I woke up in my house in Binyamina, and I watched the WhatsApp still from bed, my WhatsApp messages, and I saw that my dad wrote in the family group that there are sirens, alarm, missiles, shooting, a lot of noise, and they locked the house, and they are inside the safe room. As crazy as it might sound, it's normal. It's happening every few months or once a year at least. So I said, okay, something is coming. But I went usually to make coffee for my wife and for myself. And while making the coffee, I saw in the news that there is a Hamas invasion to the neighboring Israeli communities to the border. And this is something I never remembered that happened before. And of course, it never happened. So I said, wow, I better call the dad. So at 7:40, I called him, and he said exactly what he wrote. They are in the safe room, a lot of noise, shooting, alarms, sirens, and that is and mom are in the safe room. I could hear my mom in the background. So I just told him, tell mom I love her, I love you, and I'll talk to you soon. And keep watching on the news and seeing the wall has been fallen and the Hamas trucks in Sderot, which is like the nearest town. I know it so well. I said, wow, like I was really shocked. And I said I should call dad again. And it was 7:45. And this time there was no answer. So I called my three sisters who live in Israel and my brother who lives in London. And we tried to call them and their neighbors. There was no answer from no one. We hoped or wished it was electricity failure or cellular reception that is down. But we said it's better we group together with the 8 grown grandchildren from the age of 12 to 19. So we grouped at my sister's house at around 11 Saturday morning, October the 7th, trying to reach them. And when we were able to reach their neighbors, and then they were WhatsApping us from their closest or like safe rooms, cannot talk, really short messages. We just told them on WhatsApp that we wanted to know what's happening. We don't need a delegation or official something. We just want to know what's going on. And 5 in the afternoon, we were able to reach the security office of Netiv Asara, and he told us that my parents' house is burned to ashes with 2 bodies inside.
Can you tell us a bit about your parents?
Yes. First, they were loving and supporting parents for my sister, my brother, and myself. My father was 78, my mom 76. They were in the prime of their life. They were all over the place. My father was an agronomist consultant, working from north to south. He was probably number one expert in Israel for wheat, sunflower, corn, chickpeas, watermelon, working full time. He was very active, walking on the beach at least 5 kilometers a day, practicing Pilates daily. And my mom, she was an artist, and since I remember, she was doing art. And even in the early 80s, she was doing art from garbage, what now is so trendy. So I remember, like, every summer she would ask us to keep all the ice cream stick. So we would keep all the ice cream stick, and at the end of the summer, we sat around the table, and she gave us colors so we can paint those arctic sticks. And then she glued them together and frame it, and it was on the wall of the house till October the 7th. And in the recent year, she was a mandala painter and also teacher. She had a group of students from children, youth, adult, and elderly that would come every week for a mandala lesson, and she refused to take money from her students. And her student argue with her that she must, and they reach an agreement that each one will pay as much as he can. And she was also swimming every day, practicing yoga, and both of them were very loving and existing in their grandchild with their grandchildren. Again, the three young one lives in London, and the adults live in Israel. So they are very loving and very active.
And what do you have to say about the way Israel has responded to October 7th?
Oh, I have a lot. I have a lot to say. So I'll start that already on October the 7th in the evening, we've decided we're going to start the Shiva without a rabbi or official announcement that they are dead. So it was the first Shiva of the war. And each day of the Shiva...
can you just explain for people who don't know what, as
Sure.
Americans will say, a Shiva is?
Shiva is the Jewish way of mourning. It's like a wake ceremony that is going day after day for 7 days. And Shiva is 7 in Hebrew. So when all your friends, your parent, my parents' friend, many phone calls, messages, thousands of people came to pay their condolence, hug and cry with us. So every morning we started with just my brother and sisters sitting together, and during the evening with the grandchild. And I think it was the second or the third day that we say that from our personal tragedy, we want to make a universal message. And our message is, you shall not revenge. We are not asking for revenge, the otherwise. You shall not revenge. So this was the first thing we said already during the Shiva, and definitely we are saying it now. And after we end the Shiva, it was Friday afternoon, and after a week of crying, I know how to cry, and I can make other and assist other to cry. It's very important to cry. So suddenly my mind became very clear and sharp, and I told myself, Maoz, you are on a mission. You're on a mission, and your mission is to bring the hostages back, to stop the war, to do what you can so this extreme right radical government will resign. And the most important mission is to create hope, to convince yourself, your family, and all the others that the future is going to be a better future. And going back to your question, is what the Israeli government is doing now is exactly the opposite. They are doing everything that they can in their power to make our future miserable for Israelis and Palestinians, that will live on our sword forever, and that this cycle of blood, of death, of revenge, of fear that is going on for a century now will continue. They are doing exactly the opposite than what is needed to bring security to the people of Israel, and also equality and justice to the people in Palestine.
And what about their, how do you see their role in preventing or not preventing October 7th?
I see the government of Israel accountable for October the 7th. For betraying my parents, but 18 more members of my parents' community and 100 or more victims from the communities next the borders, because the state of Israel was founded and established under the rule or the message, it shall never happen again. It shall never happen again that there will be pogroms and Jewish victims in a massive numbers. This is why Israel, the state of Israel, was established, and they failed. They failed to in their promise. The state of Israel failed in fulfilling its its number one promise, and and of course Hamas is also to blame, but Hamas is a terrorist, fundamental, extreme organization, and his aim and his motivation and way of acting is to kill innocent people. So Hamas was doing what is expected from a terrorist organization, and the state of Israel and the Israeli government failed in doing what they were expected. But from that, I want the lesson I learned during the last 3 months, and this one I learned many lessons from peace activists that are working on the ground for many years. And one of the most amazing and admirable peace activists is Hamza Awaude. He's from Ramallah, Palestinian from Ramallah. And what I learned from Hamza was his words: I'm willing to forgive about the past, I'm willing to forgive about the present, but I won't forget myself and no one else if we won't build a better future. So I'm willing to forgive. I'm willing to forgive everyone for everything, for the past and for the present. But I won't forget no one if we won't build a better future.
When you call Hamas a terrorist organization, I mean, do you think October 7th would have happened if Palestinians weren't occupied and besieged by Israel?
Again, I cannot tell how the past will be under different circumstances. And also for me, I don't care about the past anymore. I really don't care. I don't care who started it. I don't care how many numbers of victims. I'm not counting victims. I'm not counting innocent people. All innocent people who died are human beings that wasn't supposed, and I'm crying for the death. I start crying for them at the beginning. I cried so much for all the innocent life that will be lost during this war. So who started it? Who's to blame? I'm not there. I'm not in this game or blaming game. We are all to blame because we haven't done enough. But I'm looking into the future. I'm just looking into the future. And in the recent years, I've been working a lot with narratives, Palestinian and Israeli narratives. I was doing tours in Nazareth, which is the largest Palestinian city within Israel. Nazareth is in the Galilee. All the population in Nazareth are Palestinian with Israeli ID. One out of 5 citizens in Israel, not the West Bank, not in Gaza, 1 out of 5 is from the Palestinian minority. These are a huge number. It's a big minority. So I was doing tours in Nazareth, and I was emphasizing the importance of knowing the other side narrative. It's a completely different narrative. The Palestinian and the Israelis, it's a completely different narrative. So just by knowing the other side narrative, we don't need to agree. And definitely there is no point in arguing, because if we'll argue, another 100 years of this bloody cycle will continue. But if we know the other side narrative, we can step forward. So I want to step forward.
And just before focusing on moving forward, I know that I'd read something where you said your parents were concerned about what was happening. I guess two questions. Like very recently, right? They were concerned. They saw things happening and heard gunshots. Was that the day of, or were they saying stuff before in the days before?
So first, my parents and also their community, they weren't living in fear. They weren't living in fear. They trusted the IDF, the Israeli security system, the intelligence, and the government for protecting them. The wall that was surrounding their village was the highest wall probably human being ever built, and the deepest wall human ever built, and with the most highly sophisticated and invested and pricey security system. So they weren't living in fear, but there were many signs that something is going to happen, and many from the communities try to alarm and tell about those signs, but everyone ignored them. So there are, I think it was Monday or Tuesday before October the 7th that Hamas was doing a training day that they all said it never happened before. So many and the flying machinery that they used to go over the fence, they were doing it, but
The
just on the
paragliders?
paraglides, the engine paraglides. They were training with them on the 10 meters from the Moshav fence and wall, but on the Palestinian, on the Gaza side. But they are using them and flying with them and training. And they were training with the heavy firing, but to the sea, not to the west, not to the east. And on Saturday, they were just doing the real thing, which they practiced for so long. So there are a lot of warning, but everyone ignored.
And people on did your parents and their friends tell authorities, tell police about it,
Yes.
or
Yeah. They told everyone, and everyone said it's okay. Hamas is training. That was the official answer. There were also electricity breakdown in the last 6 months. That for few hours there was no electricity in the community. So they called the Israeli electricity company. They called the military. They called the police, and everyone said it's not us. No one knew why and what is happening. And then after a few hours, the electricity came back. So of course it fell down again on October the 7th morning.
And I'm sorry, this is very sensitive, but have the authorities given you any indication of how your parents were killed? And what I'm wondering here is there are testimonies now from survivors of October 7th who've spoken about Israeli tanks firing at homes, for example, at Kibbutz Be'eri. There was another investigation recently from Yediot Aronot, the Israeli newspaper, about how Israeli forces fired on vehicles that contained hostages from October 7th. So, do you have any clarity on what happened to your parents, how they died?
So first, I don't read newspaper personally. So, but I do know about the cases you are talking about, and I don't trust the Israeli government or military to really investigate. I personally, as a citizen of Israel, someone who lived here and was born here, I don't believe what the outcome of those investigation, if they will ever make any investigation. But I'll tell you another thing that I was asked much more direct question from a Palestinian friend, a very close friend that knew my parents very well. And she asked me, Maoz, maybe, I just want to raise this question. Maybe what burned your parents' house with your parents inside wasn't a Hamas rocket. Maybe it was a crossfire. So first for me, as an Israeli who just lost his parents, it was very difficult to hear this question. Very difficult. And like she's saying me, it didn't, basically she said it didn't happen. But then I told her, you know what? Maybe you are right. Maybe you are right. Maybe it wasn't the Hamas. Maybe it was a crossfire. But what does it matter? What does it matter? My parents died because of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And my mission in life, I decided to commit my life for making peace. What does it matter who killed them? they were killed because of the conflict. And I'm going to solve and I'm going to make peace between the river to the sea. Do you want to join me in my efforts of making peace? Or do we want to question or argue or about who started it and who's to blame? So, of course, she said, yes, I want to join you in your efforts. So, this is what I'm saying. We didn't need to answer a question with an argument. Let's answer a question with something productive, something that will take us forward. And I will have my own narrative that it was the Hamas. If I would think it was the Israeli government, I don't know how I could live. I'm very honest and open with you. I don't know how I could live if I would know that it was a crossfire. So my narrative is the Hamas. And for her narrative might be different. And again, and it's okay, I'm not going to argue with her. But I'm going to build a shared future with my Palestinian friend. And this is where I put all my efforts.
I know that you've been taking part in protests since October 7th. What have those been like? How have you been treated by police? And what have you been calling for?
So at the beginning, I was still very mad and there was a lot of anger inside of me. Till I learned the lesson from Hamza Awad that I need to forgive. So we started a protest opposite of the Knesset, the Parliament House of Israel, with another newly buried families from October the 7th. And we started a protest tent, and some of the families are there 24/7 with a very direct call and message that the government is accountable and the government must go.
And how have you been treated at the protests?
Again, the police is playing this as a bereaved family. The police are much more caution than on the normal people, not privileged as us. But the government and the police are against and shutting down or canceling protests that are calling for ceasefire, that are calling for empathy with the people in Gaza. So it's we are definitely feel that the calls and for a ceasefire and for stopping the war are being silenced brutally sometimes, silenced brutally, or with like letters from the police that we cannot hold the protest.
What did your parents think of the treatment of Israel's treatment of Palestinians? Were they concerned that something like this would happen?
I don't. Again, we were like living it. The wall and was so high physically, but also spiritually that we didn't saw it. It was just there, but we didn't. It wasn't part of the our family dinners, which we had once a week or twice, like a few times a month when we all gathered. It wasn't the topic. It wasn't what we spoke about the situation of Palestinian. And my parents did went to protest against the government, and they were politically active, but and again, and of course I was much more active. But on family meetings, it wasn't like we discussed. It's not that it wasn't a topic. It wasn't on the table, literally.
It seems like most Israelis are supportive of Israel's response to October 7th. People who haven't experienced what you experienced. You experienced loss. Your parents were killed, and yet you're able to say, not in my name, not in our names, don't, and we're not calling for revenge. Why do you think it is that you're able to see this and so many other people aren't?
It's the easiest way for a government or a regime to control the mass, the public opinion, is by fear, by finding an enemy, by dehumanizing this enemy. And Hamas was doing all in its power to help the Israeli government to dehumanize him and the people of Gaza. It's for me, it's devastating. It's a tragedy that like I see it happening in front of my eyes, and I'm trying to stop it, but I don't have the power. So this is why I'm thankful to you for amplifying my voice. And I'm not alone. There are many many Israelis that are calling for a diplomatic solution, that are calling to stop the war, that understanding that if we'll kill 20,000, 30,000, 40, I ask, how many Palestinian do you want to revenge? It won't bring security. It won't bring peace. It just create a call for revenge from the other side. So there are many Israelis that see it as I see it. But we've been silenced. We've been silenced by the Israeli media, by the Israeli press, and also by international community. By international community, they are not coming when ambassadors, head of the Biden administration are coming to visit Israel, and they are coming on a daily basis. They are meeting, and of course, it's very good at meeting the family of the hostages, but they are not meeting the peace activists.
What do you think of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and do you agree with the widespread criticism that basically he has a political incentive to keep this assault on Gaza going for as long as possible because of the questions he faces about October 7th and also the corruption charges that he faces and wants to avoid?
So again, I want to be modest, but I think I'm the first one who said that, and it was Thomas Friedman wrote it on the New York Times week after I said it. I don't think he heard me, but I have it record that it's a political war. It's within the Israeli Prime Minister agenda that the war will continue forever because it allows him to unite the mass people of Israel around this cause, around this hate and fear, and it's serving him. And at the same time, it serves the Hamas because Hamas popularity is also rising as much as the war is continuing, as much as the suffering and the victims' number in Gaza is rising. So the war is serving both the extremists, and we were hijacked by our government and by Hamas that are bringing this region into a catastrophe. And if we won't stop, it might get much worse. And this is what really frightened me. When I was saying about much worse, it might be the end of Israel as we know it. And I don't want, like, no one could imagine October the 7th. No one can imagine what will happen if this cycle will continue. And I also said before, and I'll say it now, even though, again, it's not what I'm dealing with now. I don't mind talking about it, but it's not where I am at the moment. That Netanyahu is the worst Jewish leader in the Jewish history. In the Jewish history, is the worst leader ever since the beginning of Judaism, about 3,000 years ago, to nowadays. He will be considered, as much as humanity will continue, the humankind will survive and be on planet Earth, will be considered the worst Jewish leader ever. But we're all going to suffer from it.
And why do you say that he's the worst Jewish leader ever?
Because I think he put the third Jewish existence in Israel to a risk that might bring to its end.
And can you just explain to people who don't know about this how this war is helping him politically?
Yeah, because the opposition, some opposition parties join his coalition of war. So he's got, like, if before he had a majority of 64 against 56, now I think he have like 80 votes against 40. So he have a huge coalition of war. And the parties in the coalition says that they will continue supporting Netanyahu as long as the war continuing. So of course he wants the war to continue. And of course he don't care and he don't mind about the hostages. They are political hostages in the hands of Netanyahu. He don't want an agreement to bring them back during a agreement or a deal. He don't mind. He don't care about them. He just don't care.
What do you think Israel should be doing right now? You've been talking about how you want to look forward. So some questions about that. What do you think Israel should be doing right now if they cared about the hostages? What would they be doing?
If I was the prime minister, first I will call for an international summit, peace summit, and stating that I want to end the conflict and the blood and the hate between Israelis and Palestinians. And I'm willing to do everything to bring this war to an end. So I will completely stop the war. And I'll ask for international summit that Israel will lead and call for with all Arab leaders, with the US, with the Europe nation, maybe others. Everyone wants to solve this conflict. And I will start negotiating and strengthening the Palestinian authorities, not the Hamas. It was for 20 years, he's been financing the Hamas. Hamas becomes so strong, not from the air, because Netanyahu allowed them to get so strong. And I will strengthen the Palestinian authorities. And I will call the people of Palestine and the leaders and the Arab world that Israel has decided that it wants to make peace with them, and that they are willing to work very hard and with pure intention to bring it into a two-state solution, confederation, whatever will be achieved on an equal level on a negotiation table and not by war in the war fields. And I will call the people of Israel at the same time and tell them, and I would use the words the former prime minister from the Likud, Menachem Begin, who was the first ever prime minister from the Likud party, the same party as Netanyahu. And when Menachem Begin welcomed President Sadat of Egypt back in 1979. And Egypt, it's also important to understand for Israelis and for your listeners, Egypt was 100,000 times stronger than the Hamas. She had a Russian military equipment sent by airplanes and ships, including aircraft, including artillery, including anti-aircraft missiles. They were very strong. After only 6 years after the most devastating war Israel had so far in 73, only 6 years after, Menachem Begin is welcoming President Sadat of Egypt in Jerusalem. And what Menachem Begin is saying, we can prevent the war, but we cannot prevent peace. So if I was the prime minister now, I would say, I want to follow the word, the legacy, the heritage of former prime minister from the Likud, from the right legacy, and to go on the path he established back in 79. And it's time now to go back to this path and not to the path of war and hate.
What do you think a two-state solution would look like? And do you think a one-state solution could ever be possible with equal rights?
So again, I would say my personal answer is that I don't care. I don't care. It can be one state, it can be 10 states, as long as we live peacefully among each other, and as long as we share values. It's like the EU. What does it matter if what does it matter if in the EU there will be 20 or 30 or 40 states? It doesn't matter. And again, the EU was founded on the ashes of Europe. It didn't come from somewhere, from the outer space. It was founded on the ashes of Europe. And between France and Germany, there were millions of victims, maybe more, during the two world wars. And now they are partners, they are allies, they are the leaders of the EU. So it's been happened in the past, not that long ago, 8 years maybe. So it can be happen here in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, in the Israel and the Arab world. But we need to imagine it. We need to use our political imagination. It's something we stop using definitely here between the river and the sea. We must use our political imagination to imagine a better future based on equality, on justice, of reconciliation, and to start build a plan, strategy plan together, Palestinian Israelis, make the plan and execute it.
And when you say this could be the end of Israel, how do you see that even happening? What does that mean?
Like there was the first temple back, I don't know, like 2,500 years ago. There was the second temple till 70 after BC, and countries, nation are stopping to exist. If you look on the global map,
Right.
and you go 100 years ago, and you see how much the borders and states and nation coming up, rising and falling, and it can be the fall of Israel. There would be no Israel.
But how would that happen? Like what would
Like
happen?
if you would ask me on October the 6th,
Right.
so the Hamas will attack. You would ask me, how would it happen? I don't know.
Okay.
I cannot forecast it.
Right.
But like things can be much, much better, and this is we need to make it be better. Things can also go really, really worse. So and it's up to us to decide which way we want to go and to take it.
Thank you so much for your time. You've been so generous with your time. Any final words that you want to share about how, like, what concretely needs to happen moving forward?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would love to share it. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been initiating more than 20 enterprise, tourism, social, political, and there is a methods that run within all my initiatives. Big dream, values, partners, strategy plan, execution, and constant look for meaning. And I become a tourism entrepreneur, and I'm working in the same method. I have a dream of peace. I have values that I already stated. That I think we all agree on them. I'm building partnerships. And now I do want to I want to ask you, do you want to be my partners? Do you want to be my partners in reaching this peace? And this is what the question I ask in all my meetings. And I always, still so far, got yes. I'm still waiting for your answer.
Yeah.
Katie and Aaron, if you want to be my partners, because we need to build partnership, alliance. And now we'll build a strategy plan and we'll execute it. The same way as you're building a business or a concept or taking an idea, making a vision into reality. And now I'm building the strategy with many partners, Palestinian Israelis, and international community. We are sitting now building this strategy, and we're going to execute it, and we're going to make peace in 4 to 6 years. And if your listeners and yourself, how can we help? How can we support? There are so many shared initiatives, Jewish and Arabs, Israeli and Palestinian. So many. Support us just by amplifying our voice, share on social media, share it to your friends, invite us, invite me to speak to you, to your audience. If it's in universities, classroom, or workplace, I'm not alone. There are many of us. We are giving our hands. We are giving our hands to you and ask you to be our partners in reaching this peace. We're not going to be able to do it by ourselves.
Thanks so much, Maoz. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Very grateful to Maoz Inon for sharing his story. I can't imagine how difficult it must be still processing the killing of his parents. And he's out there, one of the rare voices in Israel calling for peace. And even though there are some areas where, I don't agree with him when it comes to, my conception of the state of Israel and other matters, I really appreciate that it's very difficult in Israeli society right now to speak out. And he's one of the few people doing it. And he's not letting his tragedy become weaponized to create even more tragedies.
Exactly. And it's noteworthy that he's someone who lost people on October 7th, and he's not calling for increased bloodshed, while you have people who didn't lose anything on October 7th who are.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. and I hope he prevails, because if Israel could stop this genocide, I mean, how many people's lives would be saved if it just stopped today? And how many people? It's just unfathomable to think about. So, very grateful to him for coming on.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you so much.
All right, usefulidiots.podcast.com is our website. Please go there to support the show and get bonus content, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening to and watching Useful Idiots. For extended episodes, bonus content, and our weekly Thursday Throwdown episode, please subscribe at usefulidiots.podcast.com. Support the show for free by subscribing on YouTube, Rumble, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to rate and review. You can also follow us on Twitter at UsefulIdiotPod. Thanks for supporting independent media. We'll see you next time.